This episode is sponsored by Smart Travel, a new podcast from NerdWallet. You know that one friend who always finds the best travel deals, picks the right cards, and somehow ends up in first class for the price of coach? How do they do that? Well, Smart Travel is like that friend, but in podcast form. They cover all things travel finance, like which travel cards earn their keep and which are just heavy, shiny metal, and planning group trips that won't ruin your budget or your friendships. So travel smarter and spend less. That's the key with help from NerdWallet. Follow Smart Travel wherever you get your podcasts. Armchair Explorer is a part of the Voyescape podcast network. Check out all of their shows from around the world at voyescape.com.
So we just booked it down towards this river called the Sagana River and tried to get away from them as quick as possible. And the sun was kind of going down at this point, and so we just got into this really dense brush and kept battling on down towards the Sagana. And we would break out of the bush into the clearing and look back up on the ridgeline, and we would see the poachers kind of silhouetted with their big old spears looking down at us. I was like, oh man, guys, I think they're following us. And they're like, yeah, we really need to hike into the night, get away from these guys, because we're really vulnerable out here and they might come into the night and try to see what we were doing and mess with us a bit.
Today we're speaking with Chris Carter, who's setting records by helping Kenya Wildlife Services establish the country's first long-distance backpacking trail. There's only one problem. Mapping the route means bushwhacking through some insanely hard and dangerous wilderness, and there's all sorts of surprises hiding out there in the bush. Are you ready? Let's go. Welcome to Armchair Explorer, where the world's greatest adventurers tell their best stories from the road. My name's Aaron Miller. I'm a travel writer and your host. I stumbled upon this story when Chris's video popped up on my Instagram feed. He's also a videographer and he documented this journey too. And I immediately fell in love with the idea. Not only is it an amazing adventure, but it's also an amazing project. Chris grew up in Kenya and he is building this backpacking trail for Kenyans to provide an opportunity for them to experience a true adventure in their own backyard. Most of the stuff that's out there is for tourists, and this is for them. You can check out his stuff on Insta at chris.cart.er, and he's on YouTube at Chris Carter Media. We'll link to those in the show notes as well. And listen at the end for more details on how to help out in Chris's mission if you feel inspired by this story. And while you're at it, follow me too. I'm on Instagram and Facebook at Armchair Explorer Podcast. So I have a question for you, and I'd love to hear what you think. If you could go on a multi-day backpacking trip anywhere in the world, where would it be? For me, there's so many I'd love to do, but I've got a long hit list for that. But it's got to be the Himalayas for me. I've never been. I've always wanted to go. It's a huge dream of mine. And I think the top of the list, there's so many great trails out there, of course, but the top of the list for me would be the Trans-Bhutan Trail. It's about 250 miles long, takes just about a month to do, and it crosses the entire kingdom of Bhutan. How good does that sound? But what about you? Tag me with a post about your dream backpacking trip or drop me a line at Armchair Explorer Podcast. I'd love to hang out and talk travel. We're going to get on well. But don't worry about that right now, because we have some bushwhacking to do.
We always say you never wash the dust of Africa off your feet because it just sticks with you and changes you to your core. I mean, growing up there was just the most magical childhood ever. We would just have our motorcycles and battle around, going off for month-long trips in the bush and sleeping in trees from hyenas and lions. And it's just a totally different world. Really, as I look back on it, just painted with so many unbelievable memories. There's a lot that stand out, but there's definitely one where we were on a long motorcycle trip for about a month, and we were going around this mountain called Mount Galai. It's just one of the most remote places I've been to, super difficult to access, and I was with 3 of my best buddies. We're all on our little dirt bikes. I was in 10th grade, I believe, and we got to this place called Wosi Wosi on the other side of the mountain, and it's called that for the sound that the wind makes. It's just this torrential wind that cascades down from the mountain, and you're battling across these kind of salt flats almost. And I just remember driving around in the sunset, and there's herds of giraffe running by, and we hadn't seen anybody for days, and it was just this euphoric sense of this childhood like wonder of, I just remember being so enamored with that moment and consciously thinking, I never want to forget this. And then we came to a lake called Lake Natron, and there's these beautiful springs, these hot water springs that gush out of the base of Mount Gilai. And you can go, and it's this beautiful oasis in the middle of a desert. The springs gush out. There's these ferns and beautiful just trees and everything that just seem to pop out of the dark desert. And we spent the night there, and we set up camp, and we built a couple fires. And then there was this kind of a waterfall coming out of the mountain that was a hot water spring, and we kind of made this like jacuzzi like thing at the base of a waterfall, and we were sitting there, and then the sun was going down, and there was a rainstorm on the other side of Lake Natron, and it just cast the most incredible lights. And then this pride of lions came up to our camp, and they started growling real low and just went whoo, whoo, whoo. And I just gives me chills, man. Those memories, just sitting there as a 10th grader, so wild, hearing the lions in the background, sitting in this natural jacuzzi, looking at the sunset. It's hard to top that,
You cannot leave Africa, Africa said. It is always with you, there, inside your head. The writer Bridget Dorr wrote that in a poem dedicated to Nelson Mandela, but it applies to all of us. Africa is the oldest inhabited continent. It's where we all come from. And because of that, perhaps, there's an essence out there in the wilds of the bush that's unlike anywhere else on Earth. You feel primordial, the author Jodi Picoult wrote of it, rocked in the cradle of the world. But while Chris's childhood was idyllic in many ways, bathed in that essence, there was another side to it too.
I grew up in a place called Kajabi. And when I was growing up, there was a big problem with people coming in from other villages around Kajabi and chopping down this beautiful, beautiful forest and making charcoal illegally in the forest and then going out and selling it. And the forest was protected by Kenya Forest Service, but it wasn't regulated that well. And so there was a group of locals that formed basically this, almost like a vigilante forest protection group. And they would go out and kind of chase these charcoal burners away and try to protect the forest because they were destroying it at a rapid rate. And I remember just hearing incessant sounds of cutting the trees. It just became ubiquitous. You would just constantly hear chop, chop, chopping. You would see these big flumes of smoke as they lit their charcoal kilns, and it became a real issue.
Deforestation wasn't limited to Kajabi either. Both private, unlicensed loggers as well as large milling companies harvested billions of dollars worth of timber across Kenya in the 90s. A moratorium was put in place from 1999, but it didn't stop everyone, and Chris's precious forest continued to fall and burn. He was a kid still, only about 15, 16, but he began going out with these forest protectors, and he developed a reputation among the loggers as someone that was spying on them.
There was a couple times where I was out on a run by myself in the forest, and a couple of these guys that were coming in to cut the forest down, they recognized me, and they started chasing me and saying like, oh, we know you. You're the guy that's coming to spy on us. You've been coming out and trying to steal our charcoal and all this stuff, and we're going to kill you. You better run. There was one time in particular, they caught me, and I just ran away as fast as I could down a railroad track that I was on. And a bunch of guys came out of the forest and just started chasing me with machetes. And thankfully I had my German Shepherd with me, and they're very scared of the dog. And so she thankfully chased those guys up into the forest. I was able to sneak past, and I knew that there was this cave that I could hide in a ravine if I got to a certain point. So I just kind of sprinted as fast as I could and jumped down into this ravine with my dog, and I went and hid in this cave for the rest of the day. And thankfully they didn't find me, and I snuck back home at night. But it's a scary thing to experience. I think I was in maybe 10th or 11th grade then. And it's like that forest, it was personal that they were cutting it down, because that's where my love of adventure started. And when I would just, explicitly see it being deforested and just entire hillsides getting clear cut, and causing these massive mudslides to come down through the Kajabi village. It was very sad to me. And then also to be chased a couple times and called pretty horrible words and threatened that they were going to kill me. Yeah, that stuck with me for sure.
But despite the dangers, the Kajabi forest kept drawing him back in and would become the bedrock from which his love for the outdoors would continue to grow throughout his life. So when Chris moved overseas to attend college in the States, he was inspired to explore all of the mountains and forests that America had to offer too. He backpacked the John Muir Trail, the Pacific Crest Trail, the Continental Divide Trail, and the Appalachian Trail, traversing hundreds of thousands of feet of elevation change and thousands of miles. And everywhere he went, from the granite towers of the Sierra Nevada to the humid forests of North Georgia, he marveled not only at the views, but at the access.
The root of it is just growing up, falling in love with adventure in Kenya and not really having a lot of amenities to explore that. You know, all of our backpacking, hiking, and motorcycle rides it's just kind of bushwhacking. There was never really any amenities like an established trail. You know, the more I did in the States and around the world, the more I realized there's really nothing in Kenya to have that experience. And a really neat thing that we've seen in Kenya is just this blossoming excitement for the natural beauty that is in Kenya. And it is magical. A lot of Kenyans, at least my personal friends that are Kenyans, view the national parks as almost like for tourists, you know, not necessarily for them to go out and explore. And then compounding that, there's not a lot of amenities to go out and actually experience it aside from just going on a road. So like there's no trail systems aside from some small day hikes. But aside from that, there's not a lot of long distance, maintained, established backpacking trails. And when I came to the States, one of the communities that I really latched onto was the long distance backpacking and thru hiking community here in America. And so, you know, I came back after graduation in 2019 to work in Kenya and Tanzania, and I just really saw this new community of outdoorists in Kenya, and people that were psyched to get after it, and they were rock climbing and bolting lines and hiking everywhere. It was either like a bushwhack or following roads, but they were getting after it, and there just wasn't a lot of amenities.
Chris knew that if Kenyans had better access to the outdoors, more local people would do it. But he had a bigger plan too. He recalls one specific hike early on in his backpacking days in the States when he and a friend stopped for lunch and his friend's chocolate bar wrapper suddenly blew away in a gust of wind. Instead of just shrugging and continuing to eat, as Chris and his Kenyan peers might have done when they were kids, they didn't know any better, his friend leapt to his feet and sprinted after the wrapper, determined to leave no trace. It inspired him and it made him think. He went after those illegal loggers as a kid because he loved that forest. It mattered to him. And it mattered to him not because he'd read some pamphlet about illegal logging, but because he grew up playing in it.
What I'm personally really passionate about is the best way to combat climate change and the effects of climate change and environmental degradation is by getting people outside to experience the magic of nature. Once you go out and you actually have that intimate experience, then you develop this mindset of preservation. And without the amenities to do that, without climbing crags, without trails, then how are you going to do that? So it's almost an indirect way of trying to address some of the environmental issues that Kenya is facing. This really is a mission that's developed by Kenyans. Kenyans are spearheading it, and they're passionate about it. And that to me is so exciting. Unfortunately, in Kenya, they'll just throw trash on the ground. I mean, I remember just traveling around in Tanzania in the public transport, and they'll just pass a trash can down the aisle and you'll throw all the trash in the trash can and the last person just dumps it out the window, you know? And there's just not that mindset of leave no trace, not because they hate the environment, there's just not that really education about it. And it's cool because that mindset is growing in Kenya, but we want to develop that and we don't want it to just fizzle out. So there's a big push right now to and organically develop that excitement and passion for environmental protection.
Chris had his big idea. He would go and create Kenya's first long-distance backpacking trail, and in doing so, he would give Kenyans the kind of experience he'd had in the wilderness out in the States. And he knew exactly where to start. Aberdare National Park, about 100 miles north of Nairobi, is one of Kenya's most important ecosystems. Spanning about 400 square miles, it is a land of hidden waterfalls, volcanic peaks, and tropical forests shrouded in mist. Elephants, rhino, lions, and more make their home here. There are mountains to climb, forests to explore, wide open moorland to spot wildlife. And being so close to the capital, Chris knew there would be plenty of potential backpackers willing to try his trail. There was just one problem. Somebody had to figure out the route, and it had to be done in person.
I was going with two guys, and they had never been backpacking before, never been camping. So I did a quick backpacking 101 crash course with them the night before, how to eat freeze-dried food instead of ugali. It was a little intimidating because there's a lot of unknowns. They were so incredible, though. They're named Paulo and Martin, and I give them so much credit for just jumping into the dark there. But yeah, we set off near Shamata Gate, which is at the northern part of the park, and started following an established trek that goes from Shamata, a place called Twin Peaks, up to Lesatima at about 13,000 feet. It's a beautiful, gorgeous climb. You're just looking right at Mount Kenya to the left, and just a magical ecosystem up there. High altitude's tricky. The trails out there are super steep, and so we realized it was gonna get really real. We were on an established trail, and we were already felt like sipping through a straw air, and we realized how difficult this trek was gonna be. But getting to the top was really good. We celebrated a lot, and from here, let's just take it one step at a time and see what happens. I had identified a couple of bailout points where there's some roads that crisscross the park that we could leave from, and so I said, from here we're gonna push 10 kilometers, and there's a potential trail that we can bail out. We'll reanalyze and see how we're doing. I just kind of laid it out, and they were like, all right, I feel good. Let's see what we can do. So yeah, we set off from there and just kind of stayed up on this beautiful high altitude open ridge line for miles, and just gorgeous views, and went through this gorgeous natural feature called the Mountain Gate, which felt like a tropical Sierra pass. It's just this beautiful pass that goes between the mountains, and jumped down into this big bowl, and it was just magical. We saw this huge herd of eland just running through this bowl, and we just kind of stopped and took it all in and appreciated it. And we were all hurting pretty bad, but it was doable, and we were feeling pretty good about it. We were like, all right, this isn't too bad. From there on, it just dropped down out of the alpine zone and got incredibly dense. I mean, just unbelievably dense bushes to cut through. We had a couple machetes that we brought, and we were just kind of carving the way. We were pretty far away from our last bailout point, and we looked down, and Martin goes, man, nadhani kuna watu huko, and I think I see some people down there. And I took my binoculars out and looked down, and sure enough, there's a group of 7 hunters that were hiking through the bush, and they had a big animal between them. And they were just a group of poachers that had just killed what we think is either an eland or a buffalo. And it's very dangerous to run into poachers out there because they know the consequences of what they're doing. And so they can often be extremely volatile and aggressive if they see you, especially with me with a big camera. If they thought that I was taking photos of them, would have been game over, And so I quickly stashed the camera, and we hid down, kind of waited for them to circle around, and they decided to kind of circle back. And we thought that they were out of sight, and so we kind of went down in elevation and went around this rocky outcropping, and actually ended up running right into them. It was super unfortunate. Growing up, I had had a couple of pretty sketchy experiences with poachers. I'd even been shot at a couple times. And so I just dove behind a rock. We hid, and thankfully they actually thought we were rangers. So they dropped their kill, they dropped their spears, and they took off sprinting. We quickly wanted to just get away because their kill is sitting right there, all of their spears, and we didn't want to be associated with that. So we just booked it down towards this river called the Sagana River and tried to get away from them as quick as possible. And the sun was kind of going down at this point, and so we just got into this really dense brush and kept battling on down towards the Sagana. And we would break out of the bush into the clearing and look back up on the ridgeline, and we would see the poachers silhouetted with their big old spears looking down at us. I was like, oh man, guys, I think they're following us. And they're like, yeah, we really need to hike into the night, get away from these guys, because we're really vulnerable out here and they might come into the night. And try to see what we were doing and mess with us a bit. So we just kept on hiking way longer than we thought we would. And it was kind of scary because we'd break out of the bush into a clearing and look back, and they would have advanced to another ridge and looked down at us. And it was like, oh man, they're definitely following us, you know?
As the sun set, the group anxiously pressed forward, glancing behind them at the ridge every few minutes. Chris could almost hear in his imagination the distant shouts of those men chasing him back through his childhood, machetes waving, their fleeting shadows streaming through the woods behind him as he ran. Eventually, it fell so dark that they could no longer see whether or not the poachers still lingered behind. All they could do was hope they'd lost the trail. Finally, after hours spent trekking in the dark, they felt safe enough to set up camp.
That first night was really cool. We didn't have any issues with animals. We heard a bunch of elephant in the distance, but they never came into the camp, which was good. And then the next day, we woke up, and part of what's so brutal about hiking through the Aberdare is there's these massive moorlands. And one of the reasons that the Aberdare is so important is it's a huge water tower for Nairobi and for a lot of villages in Kenya. And because it just not only sucks in rain, but it sucks in mist into these huge moorlands that act as sponges, and it filters that water into these massive river systems, which is why you have so many incredible waterfalls there. But it's a very important park for watering a lot of Kenya. And that unfortunately is very difficult to walk through. So a lot of our navigation was just trying to route around these massive moorlands, and right out the rip on the second day, we went right into a moorland. And so you're hiking through, and it is a very, very challenging landscape to go through. There's these huge clumps of grass that you're kind of trying to balance on like islands. And if you fall between them, you can sometimes get sucked up to your hip in mud, and it's very hard to get out of. And so we were all just kind of like hopping from island to island, and several times we slipped through the cracks and just fell straight into this mud. And I mean, when it goes up to your hip, it's really scary because your other friends have to come and pull you out, and it feels like sinking sand in a way. And there was one time I fell in, and thankfully it was only up to my knee, but my boot popped off when I pulled it out. And so we had to quick dig down and grab my boot. And it was just like such slow going. You know, we went from hitting a pretty good clip the other day, high up in the alpine on the ridge lines, and going down to just barely knocking out a couple of kilometers an hour. And so that just completely zapped us, and finally got through the moorlands, and it immediately descended down into just super, super dense jungle. The moment we hit the jungle, then Paulo and Martin turn to me and they say, okay, Chris, so what's our game plan when we run into an elephant?
Because even though elephants are amazing animals, when you're on foot, they're also the last thing you'd want to startle. Not only are they the largest and strongest land mammals on Earth, they can also run about twice as fast as a human and are extremely protective of their families, particularly their young. And humans are, quite rightly, more often than not perceived as a threat.
I said, they're like, we need to come up with a plan because we're all going to disperse, and then we need a specific sound so that we can find each other to come back together. And they were like, you have that sound, right? I was like, I didn't really plan for the sound, you know. I've always just, stayed together and kind of learned how to navigate it and slowly back off. They're like, no, listen, we're going to split. Like, we're going to run in all three directions, and then we're going to come back together. That's what we do here in the Aberdare, and that's how we're going to do it. And I was like, all right, I guess we'll just, let's make a sound like a hyena, you know? They're like, that's a good idea. Sounds good.
Does it though? Escaping one dangerous animal by running towards the sound of another dangerous animal has an obvious potential downside. Nonetheless, they continued.
We were just kind of going down, and I mean, just moving through molasses through that jungle, man, about as dense as you can imagine. And so many times getting like cliffed out and having to backtrack and work our way around. And by that point, Paulo primarily was saying like, hey man, what are we doing? Like, this is pretty stinking hard, and I'm getting really, really tired. I was like, well, brother, I got some bad news. We got like 50 more kilometers to go. It's not necessarily going to get easier after this. And he was like, this is getting really hard. Martin was just an absolute animal and had a ton of stamina, and he was just kind of like laughing his way through the whole thing. But Paulo was starting to question what he got himself into. After a while, we did kind of run into a couple of elephants, and thankfully they were far enough away to where we could react. But the guys did split, and I was like so mesmerized. I was like, whoa, this is so cool. Check this out, guys. And I look back and I just see them like hightailing it through the bush, just running away. It's like, yo, guys, what? So finally I like start kind of like howling like a hyena, and they howl back, and we like reconnoiter in front, and it was just kind of a comical situation, but thankfully nothing sketchy happened.
The Aberdares are teeming with wildlife, from herds of galloping giraffe to the rare and elusive black leopard prowling unseen in the trees. But despite the cacophony of hoots and shrieks and growls each nightfall, it seemed their hyena trick had worked after all. But speaking of wildlife, here's where we just have to take a little aside from the story. Because the irony of all of this is that despite growing up surrounded by all sorts of apex predators, despite having a pride of lions visit their campsite, despite sleeping in trees to avoid hyenas, despite narrowly dodging Cape buffalo and angry elephants, the closest that Chris came to being killed by a wild animal wasn't in Africa at all. We're going to be back in Kenya with this story in a minute, but first, you have to hear this.
I was through hiking the Continental Divide Trail, and in Glacier, you have permits that you apply for, which kind of monitor how many miles that you do each day. And so I was getting into camp a little earlier because I could only do 15 to 20 miles a day until I had to camp in an established place. And so I got to camp once, and I set up my tent and hung all my smellies in a bag and hung it real high so the bears couldn't get it. And I was taking a nap in my tent, and I was in a flimsy single wall gossamer gear shelter that just has a little mesh door kind of. And so I was sleeping there, and it was about 5 p.m. and I woke up, and there was just branches snapping wild around me. And I sat up real fast, and about 6 feet away was this big old grizzly bear just staring at me. When I sat up real fast, I was on that thermarest, which is really loud. It was like really crinkly, and I think I pissed it off because it growled real low and just charged right at me. And I was like, well, this is it. I mean, I'm dead, you know, like, but it was kind of, I was like, there are worse ways to die. One of my fears is dying in a car accident. I think that'd be sad and lame. And if I had to die, dying by a bear maul is like a good way to go. And so that was what was going through my mind. And I was basically sleeping with my bear spray at the time, and so I had enough wherewithal to grab my bear spray, and I just somehow, in the frenzy of adrenaline, ripped my mesh door open with my hand and stuck my bear spray out, and the bear was pretty much on top of me, and I sprayed it, and it hit the bear, but unfortunately the mesh from my tent, it wrapped around my hand and kind of caught the bear spray, and it whipped around, and I ended up spraying myself right in the face with the bear spray. And, you know, the bear spray, it's designed to go 30 feet. So it almost felt like a punch in the face, and it punched me back, and I just flew back into my shelter and got into the fetal position. And it was so shocking because I had literally just woken up. And so I was groggy headed. And then within about 10 seconds, this bear charged me, and I sprayed it, and then I sprayed myself, and I was on the ground, unbelievably disorienting. And just in my mind, I was like, dude, there's nothing I can do. I'm the most vulnerable man in the world right now. It was crazy because somehow either I just hit the bear perfectly in the eyes, or the bear looked at me screaming in the fetal position, and he's like, I don't want that bad blood in me. But he turned away and went off somehow. And I mean, it was incredible, man. It was an incredible experience. I'll never forget looking into the eyes of that bear and just being like, when he's that close to you, man, you see their energy in their eyes. And it's like, that is a beautiful animal. That is vicious, you know?
Unbelievable and worth the detour. But we're going to head back to Kenya now. Chris and the team are trekking through steep and densely packed brush. No wild animals in sight, but there is something else that the Aberdares are famous for.
Several waterfalls that are just paradigmatic for that area, that are on the map and well known, but we came across many that just weren't on the map and I had never heard of before. We would just be hiking and hear this rumbling off in the distance and just kind of start following that sound, and then just come across this huge waterfall that was just not on the map. And I showed these photos to KWS afterwards, and they were like, man, we didn't even know that was there, you know? And that to me is just why we're out there, is like, there's so much to this park that's undiscovered and unexplored. And Yeah, there was, one in particular where we had gone to this majestic waterfall called Kururu Falls, and hiking to that point was just magical because I had gone there countless times as a kid, and I'd always thought how cool it would be to just backpack through and suddenly come up upon this waterfall. And so to hit that waterfall was incredible, and it's in this beautiful gorge, and you're looking across the gorge, and you kind of see some other waterfalls on the other side of the gorge, and our route that I had proposed took us around the gorge, and we were going to cross the Gura River, which dumps into the same gorge. And when we went around, then we got down to the Gura, and it kind of funnels into this big old slot canyon. I heard some more waterfalls down the slot canyon, and so we went down the river a bit, and then just came across this 60-foot waterfall easily, just plummeting down into this gigantic pool. And it's in the middle of this gorgeous slot canyon, no trails going out there at all, and it's not the one that you can see from the other side of the gorge. And it just was like, man, how many more of these are there out there? Like, just these majestic, majestic waterfalls that plummet down into these gorge, completely cliffed out on the side, and gigantic bamboo on the side, and these Jurassic ferns just completely blanketing the cliffs. Just unbelievably cinematic. And those moments were really what kind of invigorated us to keep on pushing and keep going, man, but because it was just so beautiful.
But even the most gorgeous waterfall views began to wear thin as they struggled to push through incredibly thick bamboo forests for hours and hours on end. The next morning, Paolo came out of his tent and told Chris that he couldn't go another step. "I can't move my legs," he said, which was fair. With no trail to follow, the going had been unimaginably tough. The problem was, their hardest day wasn't behind them. It was the one they were about to face. Ahead of them lay the summit of Mount Kinango. To get there, they'd have to descend 4,000 feet before immediately ascending that same amount again, topping out at over 13,000 feet. It would turn out to be the hardest climb that Chris had ever done in over 8,000 miles of backpacking.
It was just straight up, felt like vertical mountaineering through the jungle, just unbelievably steep and dense and riddled with buffalo and elephant. We were just seeing them everywhere and like trying to avoid them and trying to avoid these vertical bogs, we called them. Just an absolute battle. And I kept looking at the GPS, and the route that I had mapped, it was like, all right, we just have like 3 more miles to the top, and then we'd hike 3 miles, and I'd look and we have 2.9 miles to the top, They were just getting so demoralized. Like, when are we going to get there, man? This is brutal. And yeah, I mean, it was absolute battle to get up there, but finally summiting the mountain was magical. And we got up there. It had been sunny our entire trip, which is really rare for the Aberdares. And right as we got to the top, this massive storm cell came in and completely shrouded us. That was just seemed so perfect to end it like that, just in a crazy torrential downpour. And so the guys were already so dead, and we then had a established trail from there, continues down for about 8 miles and exits the park. And so we hit that trail, and we had this 8-mile descent, and it just poured on us the entire time, man. And it was just classic, And spent the night right on the park's boundary, and left the next morning, and thankfully got picked up from some guys that were from Cedar Retreat, that lodge up in the northern part of the park. But the guys, they were like, "Listen, man, I'm never doing that again." That was the hardest thing I've ever done. And I was like, "Well, what if it's an established trail? Would you do it?" And they were like, "Maybe if it's established, but I'm never bushwhacking that again." That was brutal.
But now that the trail is mapped, it can be built. It will be a long process, and the team will need to painstakingly navigate everything from sourcing funding to building the actual trail, constructing bridges and signage. But when it's complete, it's going to be a true first in Kenya. A safe-ish, accessible way to step into that primordial wilderness.
The proposed route will hit an extremely remote section of the park. It's a place that previously has been kind of monitored with helicopters and really difficult treks to get out there. So having a trail that's maintained and established will allow rangers to go to these areas a lot easier. And it also stays very high. I tried to follow the natural ridge lines of this mountain range that goes down. And so you have a big 360-degree view a lot of times of the surrounding area. And so you can really look down and see what's going on, kind of like we did. We looked down and saw these poachers coming out from a long ways away. So my hope is that it allows the rangers to be able to monitor that a lot better. But then also my hope is that poachers will start to get used to seeing hikers out that area, and it will deter them from coming in, because they don't want to have confrontation. They want to stay unseen, and they don't want to interact with anybody. And so if they know that there's this frequented path, then it might make them stay away from that. And this would be a path that completely stretches all the way down the park. So it's almost like this invisible wall of a deterrent is what we're kind of hoping. The route that I mapped, I feel pretty good about. It hit many main attractions that I want to see. There's always this nagging thing in my head. We came across so many unique features and waterfalls that I didn't even see on the map. And so it makes me wonder how much more is still out there. But I feel really confident that the route that we made is going to bring you through some just gorgeous, magnificent landmarks. And there's always the potential for spur trails to go out to other points of interest. It's just an awesome opportunity for people, not only in Kenya, but the international hiking community, to come and have a backpacking experience in Kenya, in one of the most beautiful places in Kenya. I think it's just going to be really cool. You go from high alpine terrain to moorlands to deep, deep jungle, just with these gorgeous hygania trees and just super, super unique ecosystems. And then climbing back up into an alpine terrain with these, super green mountains. It's really magical. I'm just excited to play whatever role I can. I have access to a lot of gear, and I can bring a lot of gear into the country, and I have a lot of backpacking experience. And so I'm excited to help and be a resource however I can. But I really want the leaders of this project to be the Kenyans that are excited about this themselves and spearheading this, because I want this to just be raised by Kenyans, for Kenyans, and I feel very Kenyan. I grew up there. It's my home, but I'm still American, and I would love for the face of this project to be the Kenyans that are very excited about this community of outdoor enthusiasts that are now hopefully having more of an opportunity to get out and experience these natural spaces.
And it's working. Although the trail isn't finished, it is underway, and Chris's dream of providing adventure access to Kenyans in their own country, of making their wild spaces something for them to treasure, not just for tourists, is getting closer. And who knows, maybe one day we'll get to walk it too.
It's vital to have connection with the international community of outdoor enthusiasts, and to put Kenya on the map as a destination for that gets me so jazzed. And I think anytime that you have something like that, it brings value to an ecosystem. And one of the coolest things for me, man, is like the Kajabi Forest has just been a perfect case study for me where I grew up. Growing up, like I said, it was just constant destruction. And now Kajabi has been identified as an adventure hub. There's over 30 miles of biking trails that have been built by these guys that we're actually going to use to construct the trail up in the Aberdares. And Kenyans from all over are flocking to Kajabi to mountain bike these trails. And there's hikers now. We've bolted some climbing lines down in this area called Big Fig, and we're developing climbing areas there in the park. And what's cool, man, is it's brought this innate value to the forest. And now you rarely hear any people coming in to cut the trees for charcoal. The forest is growing back again. The people around Kajabi have planted thousands and thousands of trees, and they're starting to grow and reforest these places that have been deforested. Every time I go back, man, I'm just like moved to tears almost at how beautiful it is to see this forest coming to life and blossoming with adventure opportunities. There's respect for the forest. It has a personality now. There's a forest trust, Kajabi Forest Trust, that protects and maintains these tree nurseries and guards the forest. And it's like just a night and day from when I was a kid, It's crazy. So there's hope. There's a lot of negative stuff going on in Kenya environmentally, but stories like this bring a lot of hope. And I've been kind of trying to model this project on that, of like, when you introduce something like a backpacking trail, then you bring innate value to that ecosystem. And it takes a village, but it's worth the effort.
Thank you so much, Chris, for sharing with us your memories and stories of a truly amazing and enviable childhood, other than those machetes, and a deeply admirable adulthood. I absolutely love what you're doing. I love your spirit of adventure, and I'm so jealous of all the backpacking you've done. I'm definitely going to be following along with your adventures and with the process of getting that trail set up so that I can head out to the bush, maybe with you, as soon as it's ready. But don't switch off yet, guys, because we're going to do something unusual for the end of an episode. We've not done this before because we have reached the end of this story, but I really wanted to share one more thing with you that Chris said. It didn't really fit into the whole story of this episode, but it's something that really struck a chord with me, and I think it's beautiful, actually, and important to hear.
People always ask me just, man, what was it like growing up there? How different is it? And I find it, even now, I've been asked that a trillion times and I really struggle to pinpoint it because it's just like everything is so fundamentally different to the core level. Society is so different. It's a collectivist society versus an individualistic society in the West. And that comes with pros and cons, but it just that fundamental difference in the way that society operates there it just changes everything. And my experience, like growing up and having friends there, how to build relationships in a collectivist society versus how to build friendships in an individualistic society. It's a you scratch my back, I scratch your back society there. And so you have this sense of building social capital. You know, if I'm going to be doing something really nice for someone, then there's almost an expectation that they're going to do something nice in return. And that sounds very selfish, but it's just this very natural kind of social exchange that you have, which is really beautiful. But I think what I first gravitate towards, and what honestly shocked me the most when I came to the States, is how the elderly are treated in more of an individualistic society versus in collectivism. For example, primarily in Tanzania, when you see somebody that's older than you, that's noticeably older, you go up to them and you bow your head low and you say shikamo, which means may I kiss your feet. And they touch you on the head and they say marahaba, which means you may kiss them 7 times. Basically, you don't actually have to do it. It's just some formality, but it just goes to illustrate this revere that you have for the elderly, anybody older than you, really. And what's cool about that is there's this innate level of respect that builds in you for anybody that's older than you, particularly the wazee, the really old men that have gray hair. That's seen as wisdom. Balding head, gray hair. The older you get, the more wise you get. And then the more you revere them. So consequently, as a Kenyan or a Tanzanian, when you grow up and you become old, then you carry yourself with such a level of revere and respect because you're like, man, that's always the person that I grew up respecting and wanting to be. And I see that a lot in the older generation as they get older. It's not a pride, it's not prideful. It's like a healthy pride. It's like just they carry themselves with respect and they accomplish really cool things. What I was shocked for when I came to the States is it almost seemed like the older you got, the more people made fun of you in a way. Like, oh, the boomers, oh, the old geezers, like they don't understand. Like just the way that my friends talked about their parents here was really shocking to me. And it makes it to where, not in every instance, but in a lot of instances, when you grow up to become older, then you look back and you're like, wow, man, I'm that person I always made fun of. I'm that boomer. I'm that old geezer. And like, you don't carry yourself with as much respect and dignity. And I think it can actually hurt our mental health in a way. And I think you see a lot of mental health issues even as you grow older, which is interesting because you should be getting more wisdom and confidence in yourself as opposed to losing confidence, And I think that's a really beautiful element of collectivist society. There's obviously really gnarly elements of it that kind of keep you down, but that to me is something that I always have identified and found really interesting.
Thanks again, Chris. And as a reminder, you can find him on Instagram at chris.cart.er or on YouTube at Chris Carter Media. And if you're interested in visiting Kenya or Aberdare National Park, go to the Kenya Wildlife Services website at kws.go.ke. Link to all that in the show notes, of course, as well. And definitely go and follow Chris. He's got an awesome page. You're going to really enjoy hanging out with him. So if you did enjoy this episode, I'll tell you what, guys, a great way to say thank you is by spreading the word. Leave a review or maybe just post about it if you think it'll inspire some of your friends or whatever works for you. Thank you. It means a lot and it really does help make a difference to help us to keep bringing this show to you. So until next time, keep your heart wild, keep your eyes out for elephants, and certainly keep respecting your elders and all their wisdom. Because the more we look for wonder in the world, the more the wonder of the world becomes a part of who we are. Dare to be truly alive. This episode was produced by Armchair Productions. Find our other shows at armchair-productions.com. Armchair Explorer is a part of APT Podcast Studios. Jenny Allison did the guest booking and co-wrote the episode along with me. Charles Tyree did the audio editing and sound design. Our theme music was written by the artist Sweet Chat. I'm your host, Aaron Miller. Thanks for listening. I'll see you next time.
Quick question. Do you want travel tips from people who have actually been there?
Our show is co-hosted by Tim Johnson, an award-winning travel journalist who's been to more than 145 countries around the world. And I'm David Brody, the other co-host who's been travel podcasting for 20 years while traveling to 50-plus countries around the world.
In about 10 or 20 minutes per show, we break down a destination with the kind of insight you usually only get from long guidebooks or hours of research.
So if you want expert advice, zero fluff, and travel inspiration that you can actually use, search for Travel in 10 wherever you listen to podcasts, or you can also find us at voyescape.com.
Hi, I'm Pauline Fromer, host of the Fromer's Travel Podcast. We post new episodes weekly, detailing the kinds of money-saving tips and cultural insights that will make your trips richer without making you significantly poorer. We do so by interviewing real travel experts like TV host Samantha Brown, Fromer's authors from around the globe, and such public figures as Free Solo's Alex Honnold. It's a fun travel party. I hope you can join us.